Good morning, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to open this session on primary resources, looking at environmental governance and risks and financial aspects. My name is Gilles Carbonnier. I'm a professor of development economics in Geneva at the Graduate Institute, and I have the pleasure to co-chair this session with Dr. Sandra Carrillo, who is a professor at the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú in Lima. So we have a dense program with five presentations that look into the governance of primary resources, the question of environmental, social aspects, but also financial aspects, looking also at illicit financial flows. So each presenter will have 5 minutes to present the gist of their presentation. And all the participants may wish to leave names, affiliation, and emails in the chat so that we can get the contacts. So following these presentations of 5 minutes each, we will have a discussion with speakers, and questions from all the participants are most welcome. So you are invited to use the chat box, and in the chat box, please indicate your name and affiliation when raising your question, and Sandra will collect these questions and raise them to the panelists. We have also a vote in this beauty contest. As you know, we have a vote to decide what is the best presenter, who is the best presenter, and what is the most interesting research that has been presented. So you can go to the poll part that you see on the right side of your Whova screen, and you can answer the two questions. What is the ID number of the best presenter and the ID number of the most interesting research that has been presented? And those most voted presenters will get an award at the closing ceremony on Thursday. So with this, I have the pleasure to turn to our first panelist. So I will turn to Lorena Munoz del Campo, professor at the Universidad Vina del Mar in Chile, who will present a topic under the design of a green bond and financial instruments for scaling up and replicating the Green Districts program in Chile. So Lorena, I have the pleasure to pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Since I have just 5 minutes, let's start. Okay, so next, please. The objective of this research was to apply sustainable finance to funding a major project in Chile that aims to increase the participation of renewable energy and energy efficiency to 60% of the market. Next, please. The project was funded by CAF, Candina Fomento, and it was part of the agenda of the Chilean government to implement circular economy by 2030 and to implement low carbon technology in the Chilean market. Thank you. Next, please. Therefore, the objective was to launch then massive implementation of renewable energy and energy efficiency in the Chilean market, focus on SMEs and small and medium-sized companies, cooperatives, and middle-class households. Next, please. The idea was to start at the top of the circular economy, meaning delivering energy efficiency and renewables energy to all the chain, to start with clean cycles instead of fossil fuel cycles. Chilean energy matrix is 60% fossil fueled today. Next, please. So part of the problem in finance market is that even finance institutions want to green their portfolios. They don't really start changing the path they follow right now. All the green technologies are seen like something experimental, something that is not sure, something that is too risky to fund. So this key point, which is to have green funding in order to implement circular economy and low carbon technology, is not working as fast as we could because of this point, which is the culture of finance. Next, please. So the point was to use the environmental leverage in order to fund and to reduce the finance risk of those projects. Next, please. The idea was to find life cycles where like environmental assets were more important than environmental liabilities in order to have a greener cycle in all the chain. Next, please. The finance instrument I designed were basically three of them. The create warranties to the banks in order to fund SMEs conversion to renewables and to implement energy efficiency, warranty bank for eco-housing, equity loans for cooperatives, and equity loan for private investor that could create a greener portfolio and fund it with this fund. Next, please. Next, please. This led to the launch of a green bond from the Chilean state. The bond for, next please, was for implementation of this finance instrument, was finally launched in June 2019 and arrived to 1.7 billion euros with a period of 10 years and a rate of 0.83%. This allowed to the whole chain to finally get an average of 5.7%, 5.87% of interest rate in all the chain for the bond and the banks. Next, please. In conclusion, the result of implementing green funding using the environmental leverage of greener chains of production implicate that in real terms, we have a positive reaction of the market. Despite of the fact that the model fulfilled all the needs of the market and the Chilean society, still the legal framework that is already in place is not fully complete in order to get all the actors on board. Therefore, there is a need of articulation of the institution in the country in order to fully implement green funding for greener cycles. This initiative was possible due to the opportunity that the green leverage of these projects, because of the direct impact that the project has on the GHG's emission reductions. The approach demonstrates finally that green funding could even increase the profit to banks, to institutions, and to companies. In terms of the social impact of the project, we have that if we implement 60% of renewable energy and energy efficiency in housing, we could reduce the carbon social cost of the country from $40 per ton to $3 to $5 per ton. We also could move all these SMEs from their cost so they could reduce the cost curve and increase their competitiveness on the markets. So finally, this win-win situation, even if it's really interesting, what the point is, we could, with this project, improve and increase the green funding, but we also need, and to succeed, to include a more efficient articulation between the institution involved. And that's the hard part of the project finally. Thank you very much. I think I used my 5 minutes, and the project was launched. The green bond is already there, and the finance instrument were also launched into the market during late 2020 and 2019. So right now it's up to the market to follow up to these instruments. Thank you very much. The next, please. There is my information, and anything you need, you can send me a mail, follow me on Twitter. So I'm over the place. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, muchas gracias, Lorena. Thanks a lot for this very rich, dense presentation. I'm sure that it will emulate many questions and reactions. So big thank you to you. And now we move on to the second presenter, Dr. Irene Musselli, who is a senior research scientist working in the area of sustainability governance, and she's at the Center for Development and the Environment of University of Bern, with the research on curbing illicit financial flows from resource-rich developing countries. Irene, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Just a second. So our research is concerned with illicit financial flows associated with trade and transfer mispricing in the commodity sector. And in this area, we face the policy question: what can be done? What are the most promising policy responses and innovations out there? And I'm very pleased to just provide a very brief overview of what we are discussing within our research framework. Let me focus on very specific targeted options against trade and transfer mispricing in the commodity trade. At the industry level, the focus is very much on technology-driven innovations in customs law enforcement. For example, the use of electronic seals or smart containers that in some contexts with some limits can be effectively deployed to detect and deter meddling with physical goods in transit. A related area that has attracted much policy attention is enhanced interagency cooperation and more robust data matching analytics. It consists of cross-matching different sets of documents, for example, customs document and transport document, or customs documents and tax filings, in order to identify discrepancies across these sets of documents that may point to manipulation, value manipulation in the trade. Another area for short-term improvement is improved trade data quality. And our colleagues in Geneva, this is an interdisciplinary and interagency research project, has advanced a very concrete proposal on how to move forward. One proposal is to have more disaggregate trade data based on different purity level. We are speaking of hard commodities, minerals. So that customs officials and other officials could spot, could identify relevant reference prices and identify abnormally priced shipments. A related policy proposal is the introduction of statistical keys that identify transactions that occur between related parties, since transfer pricing risk arise in this area. Another area for short-term policy action and improvement is enhanced payment and contract transparency, which raise more intricate legal issues from a legal perspective. And the focus is very much on what sometimes are termed as unconventional commodity deals, things like swap deals in commodities, this type of very complex and opaque arrangement in the commodity trade. Focusing on what can be done in the short term in host countries from where the commodity is extracted, well, there are proposals and ideas for improvement in the short run, especially in respect of 3 issue areas. The first is mineral valuation, improved mineral valuation with a focus on relatively new technique to fund, to leverage funds. For example, the introduction of some annual inspection fee on companies to fund independent valuation by the government. But of course, things like stabilization clauses in concession agreement may come in the way. A second area is improved sales procedures for state-owned enterprises selling publicly owned commodities. And there is a host of things that can be done through improved operational measure by state-owned enterprises in order to ring-fence a bit the buyer selection process from political interference. And finally, developing countries that are very much concerned about mispricing risks in commodities could think and could implement mispricing countermeasures in the form of simplified transfer pricing method and other prescriptive approaches to taxation. For example, legislating the use of reference prices as a basis for assessing the value of commodity transactions for tax purposes, of course. So this is just a very brief overview of the key policy options that could be implemented in the short run to fight against these illicit financial flows in the commodity sector. Of course, these options come along more broader policy interventions aimed at tackling tax evasion and avoidance and promoting responsible business practices, options that require sometimes new legal bases and that focus very much on trading hubs and the headquarters of multinational enterprises. And I will not enter into detail clearly due to time constraints. And in the end, we also have even more ambitious, more structural reform proposals aimed at tackling the root causes of the problem, for example, with respect to abusive transfer pricing. And again, to stick within my limited time frame, I will not enter into further detail. So this was just a very, very brief overview of very exciting things that are around and that deserve each of them more in-depth empirical investigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Irene. Thank you for sticking to the time frame, and we might come back in the conversation on some of the mid and long-term measures that are on your slide, but for the sake of time, you had no time to go through them. And we move on to the next presentation by Falko Bürgi as well as Christine Estregui. From the European Commission Directorate D, with a presentation on raw materials at the science policy interface through the JRC Africa Knowledge Platform. So Falko, I give you the floor.
Hello, everyone. I'm Falko Bürgi, and I'll be presenting the JRC's African Knowledge Platform. Now, the Joint Research Centre is the Science and Knowledge Service of the European Commission. It provides scientific and technical support .
I lost Falko, so I don't know if I'm the only one or if everyone lost Falko.
Yeah, I can't hear him as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think
There was a pre-recorded video though, so I'm not sure where the problem is. Shall I present live?
Yes, live is always, you see, live is always better. If you are able to present live, I think
you can try again if you wish.
My internet connection might be a bit unstable, but I can go for it. If I may just share my screen. Okay, can I get an indication? Is everybody seeing my shared screen?
Yeah, here we see your shared screen with the raw material with the title. Yeah.
Okay, so then I'll go and I'll present it live if that's okay. I'll try and stick to my time limit. As mentioned in the video, I'm Falko and I'll be presenting the JRC's African Knowledge Platform. So for those of you unaware, the JRC is the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. So its role is to provide scientific and technical support to European policymakers throughout the whole policy cycle in the design, implementation, and monitoring of European policies. When it comes to the science policy interface, we have European policies there on the right, and we have knowledge that's generated. Very often scientific information is complex and quite difficult to digest. So there has to be this sense-making process that actually filters this information and makes it relevant to policymakers. Now, the JRC plays a role both as a generator of knowledge, so there on the left-hand side of the figure, as well as a knowledge management unit that actually makes sense of that information and makes it relevant to policymakers. And an example of this is the role of the African Knowledge Platform, which I'll be presenting as a tool to try and make sense of the scientific information for European policymakers working on Africa. Now, the African Knowledge Platform is a highly visual website that presents a whole bunch of information and scientific tools relevant to Africa's social, economic, territorial, and environmental development. Now, I'd just like to note that that's the URL at the bottom of the screen of the platform, but it'll only be launched later this year. At the end of the slideshow, I'll provide a link to a demo version that you can all try out for yourselves and let us know what you think. Now, the African Knowledge Platform has many features, but I'm just going to describe 3 of them here because of the shortage of time. The first of these features is a collection of geospatial data sets. So these are GIS data, GIS spatial information that covers more than 10 thematic areas and all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. These are supplied through the website and are accessible to anybody who'd like to use this information. Then a second feature, which I'm going to give more attention to, is the development of interactive stories, story maps, or narratives. Now, this is the process of taking this geospatial information and presenting it as a narrative that can actually make sense of the complex scientific background information to a policymaker perhaps being introduced to a topic for the first time. And then finally, there's interactive and analytical tools which you can use through the African Knowledge Platform, even though they may be hosted in other parts of the JRC's network. Now, I'd like to showcase 2 of those interactive story maps, which are currently on our African Knowledge Platform. So the first of these covered critical raw materials in Africa, focusing specifically on sourcing sustainable cobalt for low emissions and digital future. Now, this story had 3 components. The first one was identifying the critical raw materials that are required in the renewables and digital technology sectors in the future. So that includes renewable technology, e-mobility, as well as space and defense. Then the second component of the story map is actually geographically showing where these critical raw materials are coming from. And we focus on a case study of cobalt in southern parts of Democratic Republic of Congo. And then the third part was actually on the ground interventions of which interventions can be implemented at mining of cobalt to ensure not only the sustainable supply of the resource, but also environmental safety, as well as the well-being and health of the miners themselves. And the second story map, which is currently related to resources on the African Knowledge Platform, is about using high-resolution satellite information to map gold mines in the Republic of Congo this time. And this story had 3 components. The first component was showing how the concessions currently awarded to gold miners in the Republic of Congo tend to be more than 5 hours of travel time away from the capital city in Brazzaville. So what this means is compliance inspectors can't simply get in a car and drive to sites. They need alternative solutions. And the solution we proposed is using near real-time high-resolution satellite information, because the process of mining changes the landscape in such a way that it can be traced from space. So there you can see in the bottom right is an example of a gold mine expanding along a riverine corridor, which can be monitored using high-resolution satellite imagery. Now, although these two narratives are very different, they share the common features in that they also provide links to purpose-built JRC information, whether it's the raw information material system or the forest resources and carbon emissions website, which links mining to forest change. And in doing so, it also links it to a specific policy message, be it the African Mining Vision or the Circular Economy Action Plan of the European Green Deal. So I'd invite you all to try out the platform for yourselves using that second URL on the screen there. The first URL will be active at the end of November once we officially launch the platform. And if anybody has any questions or suggestions after using the platform, we'll gladly answer those questions at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Falko, for presenting this fascinating platform with a wealth of very interesting data that is available, and for giving us all the necessary links also to go and test for ourselves the different functionalities and data that is provided. We now move to Fabian Oettinger, who will present research on implementing the Minamata Convention on Mercury through an environmentally sound management approach in the region of ECOWAS. And Fabian Oettinger is presenting a paper with Matthias Schlupp, is from the World Resources Forum Association, and UNIDO, probably UNIDO in Zurich. So Fabian, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Gilles. Thank you very much, Sandra, for introducing me. So I'm very sorry to, right at the start, disappoint you a bit, because although the title is Implementation of the Minamata Convention on Mercury through an environmentally sound management approach in the ECOWAS region, I'm not going to focus on primary resources, but on secondary resources. Primary will only be a part of the follow-up study. So then let's jump directly to the goal of the study. Please, Sharzad, one more. Thank you very much. So the goal is that we wanted to develop the outline for a synergetic sub-regional approach for the environmentally sound management of mercury containing e-waste and medical equipment. These two groups of appliances were identified as hotspots when it comes to the release of mercury to the environment through waste. So key elements which shall be included in the approach are policy and legislative instruments, including financing mechanisms, normative requirements, and technology-related investments. Lastly, also a roadmap for implementation. Next slide, please. So the scope of the study real quick, that's as said, the ECOWAS region, specifically these 11 countries on the right. And next slide, please. Since that's a relatively large region, we came up with the idea to have 2 to 3 hubs to make use of the regional synergies. First of all, or the most important argument for these hubs is that each country for its own has not enough waste volumes, except for Nigeria, Ghana, and maybe Cote d'Ivoire, to have a profitable recycling industry when it comes to e-waste. So they have to work together. What do we need for that? We need general infrastructure like road infrastructure, power supply. We need a specific infrastructure for the waste treatment, obviously the available waste volumes. Then we have to consider, and that's crucial, political factors and also linguistic factors, because as you know, in the region we have French and English-speaking countries. Next slide, please. Such an approach also brings quite a lot of opportunities. First of all, we hope that it will trigger all the 11 countries towards their obligations as signatories of the Minamata Convention. Then, as said, as a whole, the ECOWAS region generates enough waste volumes for a profitable recycling industry, and that's what we try to tap on. It will also create, if we manage to establish these hubs, manifold job opportunities, and hopefully help us to improve bi- and multilateral relations in the regions. However, next slide, please. Such an approach also bears risks. For examples, we heavily depend on the active participation and the support of the countries. Then obviously a super-regional financing system is quite challenging to achieve, but crucial to this approach. We have a risk of dependencies, which we have to ensure that they are not sort of abused for other power-related proposals. And then the approach mainly offers synergies for e-waste, not so much for medical waste. Next slide, please. So key elements that we need to include are a harmonized approach to ensure the level playing field in terms of a normative framework over the whole region. We need to invest into the infrastructure for the treatment, and then also for into collection and mainly collection, which will require a harmonized financing approach. Next, and I believe last slide. So as said, the roadmap for implementation includes, first of all, that we have to improve the regional cooperation. We have to develop a harmonized policy over the region. We have to standardize Mercury-specific normative requirements, then conduct a baseline study on the available infrastructure for treatment, concentrate regional efforts in hubs, define the financing system for which we aim for an EPR system, then define and share responsibilities among the stakeholders, and lastly, run a pilot to then hopefully scale up the approach. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm well aware that this was very dense and I went through it a bit like a rapper. So please feel free to just write me an email and I'm happy to share the whole study with you. Thank you.
Fabian, thank you, and congrats for going through this very dense material indeed in less than 5 minutes. So thank you for sticking to the time and inviting also participants, interested participants, to contact you for further conversation, because it is a very dense project indeed. Last but not least, we move to Nene Lomote Kulichar. I hope I pronounced your name right. So Dr. Kulichar is
you got it right.
Good. He's a lecturer at the Department of Political Science, Social Science at the University of Ghana in Accra. And he will present a research on decoding Galamsey resilience as a limited access order dynamic and a proposal for state governance effectiveness in the artisanal gold mining in Ghana. So over to you, Dr. Kulichar.
All right, thank you very much. So my presentation is based on what happens at the source in terms of gold mining, where the actual extraction takes place. And it is a context where the governance structures is an interface between informal institutions and formal institutions under the auspices of the state. But let me also say that the Galamsey, which is a colloquial term to describe small-scale mining using very crude instruments and very, very crude technologies, accounts for, conservatively speaking, about 28% of total gold production in Ghana. So it is a very important sector of the industry. But the government of Ghana since 1989 has unsuccessfully tried very hard to clamp down and regulate that sector of Galamsey gold mining using formal state institutional approaches and regulatory measures. But so far, it has failed. and it has failed abysmally so. Next slide, please. Right, so this failure is normally attributed to the government not being effective in terms of its own enforcement of its regulatory mechanisms. It is also said that these attempts by the governments to regulate the gold mining sector in the small industries has failed because political actors interfere in the process. And of course, corruption is also cited as one of the major reasons why the government has so far over the years not succeeded in formalizing the sector. Yeah, from an academic perspective, and of course, informed by a research conducted by the University of Ghana Mining Research Group and the University of York, because of the prevalence of these dominant reasons for the failure, that government is ineffective, corruption and interference by political actors, we can't nail down the underlying nuances and dynamics of Galamsey on any theory to systematically probe its nature and the forces that drive the resilience of the small-scale mining industry in the face of government pressures to contain and regulate it. Next slide, please. So we use the concept of Douglas North's limited access order systems, which presupposes that state institutions normally use coercion and other coercive forms of institutional regulations to restrict access to valuable resources in the name of formal regulation. But as it plays out in the study areas that we conducted in the Eastern region, to be specific, we found out that the government's coercive approach sidelines local actors who can be strategic in its approach to formalize the essentially informal sectors of gold mining called Galamsey. But then in doing so, the frontline institutions that are expected to enforce the wishes of the state, they convert themselves into rent extraction agents. They use the power given by the state to engage in the small-scale gold mining activities for their own benefits. Given that the low-level individuals who reside in these small-scale mining regions don't have a choice in terms of disrupted livelihood options, in terms of having to deal with the power of the state, which can be very overwhelming, they tend to form an alliance with the state institutions that are supposed to do the wishes of government and collaborate with them to make the sector thrive behind the state and the central government. And therefore the system thrives, evolves, reproduces itself, even as the state tries very hard to deploy its coercive powers of formalizing the sector. Next slide, please. All right, so given this tendency, one would propose that there are pre-existing local level actors who do not like the environmental disruptions that come with small-scale mining, but they become collaborators because they actually do not have a choice. They become collaborators because they have livelihood systems that have been disrupted. And therefore, as rational actors, they tend to engage to make the system thrive, even though no one wishes it to be so. So given the pre-existing goodwill, let me put it that way, I will propose that there are local customs and institutions that can be leveraged by central government to come up with what I refer to as green compacts. And these green compacts can be scaled up into what I refer to again as green CSOs. But when they are introduced to the SDGs, they would be given a certain clear perspective of what they need to do to protect their own environment. Then the government can come in through local government authorities with its own technocrats to formalize such green compacts into self-monitoring environmental, if you like, vanguards. And by so doing, given the evidence that we had from our research, this would be a much more sustainable, cost-effective way of formalizing small-scale gold mining and its long-term effect, reducing the destruction that it causes to the environment. Next slide, please. So if you go to where about 28% of Ghana's gold is extracted, this is a typical image that you'll be confronted with. And these are the individuals who, as rational actors, will participate with frontline state enforcement institutions just to protect themselves from the coercive regulatory powers of the state. I'm done, please.
Thank you so much, Nene, for this presentation of the key topic of galamsey, meaning small-scale and artisanal informal mining in Ghana, but also for the very concrete recommendation and the policy proposals that you put on the table. So very much welcome. Now, dear colleagues, participants, we have, if I'm not mistaken, 10 minutes left for conversation. You can go to the voting procedure, as I mentioned at the beginning, but I would like to pass the floor to you, Sandra, my distinguished co-chair, to see whether you have already questions raised. And since we have 10 minutes, I would propose to take in one go the questions both that you have in the chat and possibly others, and then revert back for a short round of response to the extent possible. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Gilles, and congratulations to every presenter. Very interesting and actually very accurate to the data. I want to put a topic for dialogue that I was considering that was common between some presentations, and some of presenters, like for example Fabian, highlighted the need to invest in, for example, waste infrastructure to create like a better performance in sustainability in mining activity. And I was thinking, how could we connect this kind of needs of investment with the the sustainable finance instruments that Lorena presented at the beginning? I would like to like share this kind of connection between the topics. We know that there is not a direct connection, but we could discuss about that from the financial perspective. And I don't know if Lorena and Fabian would like to share some thoughts about this kind of opportunity in the sustainable finance area.
Thank you very much. I think that in the future, we won't have traditional finance and sustainable finance. The point is we're transiting from what we have to now and what we will have in the sustainable world. So introducing the environmental variable to all the scheme of the human activities and the human economy is the key point. At the end, what we do when we are performing and designing sustainable finances is to take the environment and to monetize it. So, and to try to go from something that sometimes has a huge environmental impact as mining exploitation when we arrive to the end of the mining lifetime, where we have a huge environmental liability. So when we start doing sustainability, what we do is to take that liability and to refund it, rescheme it, rearrange it. So we can have, like in that scheme, a funding that could come under the umbrella of sustainable finance and to help the waste management or the decommission and demolition operation or B, transition from normal mining to, or actual mining to sustainable mining? I don't know if I can answer the question.
Thank you, Lorena. And I don't know if you, Fabian, would like to add something?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandra. Actually, there's not much to add from my side. I think I can only echo Lorena, and I really do believe that it's crucial to well, get the true costs of things, well, to make that true costing, and then get away from this linear system into a circular system. And since I see Sharzad texting that we have 5 minutes left, and I finish my statement. I guess there's another question which I've seen in the chat.
Thank you, Fabian. Yes, there is a specific question to Falko around if there is a collaboration with the African Union going on around the African Knowledge Platform. Shouldn't they host this kind of platform? That was a specific question for you, Falko.
Yeah, I will take the question. We've been working on this file together. So indeed, this is a very good question. The thing that I would like to raise is that first, at the moment, what we are doing, we are trying to grab all the knowledge, the scientific knowledge that exists at the GRC primarily, to raise awareness. So this is relevant to any stakeholders, including African partners. Of course, we have many because we have a long experience at GRC to work with African partners in different contexts and topics, not only on the circular economy part. So primarily is to raise awareness, and this is for everyone. And secondly is to actually, this platform is primarily developed for policymakers at the European Commission to make them, to help them or to support them in terms of information, scientific information that exists and that is policy relevant for the design of policy, for also the implementation and monitoring. So this is primarily what we are doing. We've been working on that for 2 years, and now we are getting in the next step. So this is relevant in the context of the European Green Deal and the context of Europe stronger in the world as a global partner. And of course, there is a particular part which is on the dialogue, which is Africa focused. Within this, indeed, what we are doing is completely relevant to the African Union, their objectives, just talking about the Agenda 2063 with the Sustainable Development Goals, but we've heard about the mining vision from the African Union that was referred from the narrative on raw material, among many other aspects. And the second step of this development will be indeed to reach out with African partners. So that we will be certainly addressing that in, high-level panels of dialogue that exist in the context of the African Union and the European Union partnership, in the context of the new communication of the Africa strategy, the new one, which has been adopted in 2020. So within this context, this is indeed a very relevant question, and there will be step forward to feature that on the platform. What I just want to add very briefly is that within the platform, there has been in the past colleagues, in particular, I will just quote one, the Pan-African Network for Economic Analysis of Policies, which is called PANAP, that for a period was hosted within the African Union platform. This was some years ago, but there are other partnerships that are also listed there. So definitely the Africa Knowledge Platform will be one to be addressed certainly in the next year. Thank you for the question. Hope I answer it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we are with the time approaching, so I would like to thank you all for your fantastic presentations and comments. I think that there are many topics to discuss about this. It's a shame that we are not together in Niva to share a drink and talk more about this. I think that we have many things in common between Africa and Latin America to share, and would be great to continue the conversation after this panel. I want to congratulate everybody for their presentation, and well, see you the next time.
Right. Bye.
I don't know, Gilles, if you want to something.
No, just echo your words of appreciation for the presentation. Very rich, very exciting. I think each of the presentation would deserve, you know, an hour of its own. But I think it was very rich, and I'm sure there will be further interactions between, you know, panelists and other participants. So thanks a lot. Thanks to you, Sandra, as well, and as well as to Shahzad, who has been. You know, animating all the PowerPoints. So that was worked very well. And I wish you a very fruitful continuation of the World Resource Forum conference. Hoping to see you, as you said, for a drink in person at another juncture. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.